How We Make Movies is brought to you by Microsoft Surface, Assimilate, Azo, and hosted by the film collective WeMakeMovies.org. Hello and welcome back to How We Make Movies. I'm your host, Amanda Lippert. Our guests today are Lauren and Jordan Bass. They're the brothers-sister casting team behind Casting, and they are bi-coastal casting office with credits in film and television, including Annabelle, The Last Exorcism, the Star series Spartacus, the Fox series Suit Up, and the Nickelodeon series Big Time Rush. They have an extensive resume on working in independent films, including The Best Night Ever, The Starving Games, Superfast, 6 Month Rule, and the Slamdance hit Weather Girl, as well as the upcoming Origami Fox and the Atticus Institute. Please give a warm welcome to Lauren and Jordan. Quite a resume. Thanks. We all know that casting actors as storytellers in filmmaking is an integral part of the filmmaking process, and you guys are part of that. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in casting?
Sure. I guess I'll start first since I was the first one in. The short version of this story is I was in development, and the company that I was with sort of disbanded, and I found that I wanted to get out of the office and go into production. And about 2 weeks into production, I realized I was not that interested in production. But I had a wonderful boss at the time, and he said, "Look, you're already here. Go see what you want to do. Go, we were in production on a television series. He said, pick a department and see what you want to do." And somehow, I think because all of my friends were actors and, he was a performer and I had a background in performing, I was like, okay, well, I'll try casting. And I sat in on a couple of casting sessions and sort of fell in love. And then as soon as the production sort of was not renewed for a second season, and I found myself looking for a job. A college friend got me an internship at Ulrich Kritzer Casting, and those guys over there were amazing, and I fell in love with casting, and that's sort of how it all evolved.
What is it about the casting process that you love so much?
I think for me, it blends together all of the different facets of my personality. I get to do, I get to work on material because I read with actors, so I'm not acting, but I get to act in my own way in the audition process. And I get to, my brain works that it likes to put puzzle pieces together, and that's sort of what casting is. It's taking the pieces of the actor and the puzzle of the script, adding in the characters of the director and the producer and everything else, and moving all of these pieces together. So for me, it just sort of clicked.
And Jordan, what about you? How did you get involved?
I was a performer. I was a professional dancer, mostly musical theater, and I had an incredible time doing it. I absolutely loved performing, still love performing. But after 2 years on tour, I realized I was very lucky that I was able to even have that experience, but I realized that was not the lifestyle that I wanted. And I decided at around 25, I could dance for another 10 years, or I could try to find something else to do. So when my tour ended, I said, I'm gonna move to LA. That's where my sister is. So I did, and shortly thereafter, she was sort of going out on her own, which is a whole nother story. But basically, she said, hey, I need help. And I said, that's nice. no interest. And she I'm not really asking, I need help. I said, okay, I'll help you on a project. And similarly, I completely fell in love with the entire process on that. I had known what casting was, especially in musical theater, from a performer's background, but I had never been on the other side of the table. And I think it was also the idea of what that specific project was. It was a project that unfortunately never happened, but it was called The Dirt, and it was the Motley Crue biography. So we were talking to a lot of people, a lot of young talent who were also performing was part of the audition process, whether they were auditioning for Tommy Lee as a drummer or Vince Neil as a singer. And just getting to view all of these actors really experiencing that and being on the other side of the table, I was like, well, if every process is like this, I'm in. It's not. But I did similarly fall in love with the entire process. I think what I always loved about performing was working with performers. And it's just the collaborative effort of whether it's stage or screen. And I didn't know when I was looking for something else to do that I'd be able to find something else that still fulfilled me in the same way. And when I realized on that very first project how much I loved every minute of the day, even the paperwork aspect, because I was like, well, the faster I do this, the faster I get to session. I was incredibly surprised, and that was a long time ago.
Do you find that your experience as a performer gives you more compassion for performers when they come in the room and they're nervous or maybe having a bad
I think it certainly gives me an understanding. Compassion is a tough word because on some level, performers are there because they've chosen to be. But it certainly does give me an understanding of what they are going through. And it's not an easy business that any of us have chosen to be in it, but I think that we've all chosen to be in whatever angle we're in because we love it. Otherwise, why are we here?
You guys hinted at that there was a story behind you going out on your own. You said at first you started with a different casting agency. What led up to you starting Bass Casting?
Totally. Again, accidentally. I was working with Mally Finn, an amazing person and mentor if anyone ever had a chance to meet her. Unfortunately, she got sick and had to retire prematurely, and we were still working, and I sort of was like, oh, well, I don't know what's happening, and I sort of asked her, I said, do you think I should go out on my own? And she said, I think you can do it. And I said, okay. Oh, okay. And then it just so happened that the first film that I interviewed for, I got, and I went, oh, maybe I can do this. I don't know. Let's see if this works. And that's sort of what happened. And then the next film, I was like, you need to come. And it just sort of, again, it wasn't something that was premeditated. It wasn't something that was even remotely thought out. It just was, it was a reaction to circumstances that happened. And, thankfully, wherever wood is, I'll knock on it metaphorically.
I think this is plastic.
Plastic. We'll go with that. We'll go with that. Somewhere, someone's knocking. It's sort of stuck in it, and it has worked out in our favor. But yeah, I wish I could say that it was thought out and really planned, but not even remotely.
What you guys do, again, is so integral to the filmmaking process, and we know that, but a lot of filmmakers try to cast films using people they know or doing their own casting calls. What are the advantages of working with a casting director for indie filmmakers?
Sure. I think I was going to say, I think there are a lot of them, and I'll let you take it. I think a lot of people that start out trying to do their own casting wind up eventually calling a casting director. Because I think that the casting process is so integral to any film, to be perfectly honest, but especially so for independent filmmaking where, the cast really is everything. I mean, the story is hugely important as well, but if you don't have the right cast to bring your story to life, you don't have a film. You could be the most amazing director in the world, you could have the most amazing equipment, you could have incredible editors, but you need people and you need amazing actors to breathe it.
But I think with that question specifically, I think that especially first-time filmmakers don't take into consideration what a large process casting is and what a time-consuming process casting really is. So while technically you can cast your own film, you can pull someone off the street, you can have an open call, you can also hold your own camera. It's a very different thing when you have a DP who really knows how to operate that camera and how to tell a story through that camera. You hire a DP for their skills. You hire a casting director for their skills. It is our job to know actors and to really be able to help facilitate putting the correct actors in the correct roles to really bring the story to life, as Lauren was saying, the puzzle piece. Every project is its own puzzle, and we are only part of the people who help put that puzzle together.
You said that it's a long process and there's a lot that goes into it. How long does it usually take from receiving the script to signing the cast, and are you part of the filmmaking process after?
I think it's
a whole lot of things.
Yeah, that was a lot of
to break it down.
Sorry.
I think that with everything, anything in this business, it's specific. There's no one formula for everything. So I think to break it down, depending on when we come into the process, that sort of affects how long a process it becomes. If, for example, you come to us and you say, we're a fully financed film, we're shooting in 2 months, we're making this film, the process generally will take around 6 weeks from the time that we begin to the time that your cast is locked down. If, however, we're approached at a very infant stage of a production where there is no financing and our job is to attach cast to get the financing, well, now we're talking a much longer road. There are projects that we've been on for years while they're still trying to put that package together and that financing thing together. Like, we're not financiers, we don't come to the table with money. So that process is can be much more time consuming. So I think it just varies and depends on when we jump aboard to how long that process can actually take. Also, although your average, you could say about 6 weeks for this is your general indie film that has about 20 speaking roles. If you have, something that requires a much larger, what I like to call needle in a haystack search, and we've done those things before where you are literally searching, with Mally, I had the opportunity to do Avatar, and we searched nationwide to find the leads. That kind of thing takes much more time because you're talking more man hours, a more comprehensive, literally leave no stone unturned kind of process. So again, depending on what you're asking us to do, depends on the time that it will take.
Can you guys talk about maybe one of the more complicated projects that you've cast, maybe without using names, if you can?
Sure.
And there was a project that we did. It was also one of the most fun projects that I had the opportunity to work on. Musical project, and we had the opportunity to do a nationwide search. Actually traveled to different cities, but it became complicated because they had. And again, I won't use specific networks, but it was a tall order. They wanted people who were singers, who were also dancers. It was fortuitous that they came to us because I had a dance background. We both have performing backgrounds, and we wound up basically being a two-man show of singing, acting, and dancing. I choreographed the combination. I taught the combination because we were brought on very prematurely in the stages of that project. There wasn't a choreographer attached. There wasn't a musical director attached.
Yeah. So we basically, it was, again, puzzle pieces and the way, especially that our brains work. Okay, great. We'll hit the ground running, and we're going to be a two-man band where we taught the songs, where we taught the dances and stuff. So it was complicated in that there were two of us, and we were traveling every single week. But it was also amazing. And honestly, I would jump at it, and honestly would jump at an opportunity to do that again, to be on the road, to get to see different cities, to get to see different actors. We don't. A lot of the times, the fun traveling part happens way after, when you get to actually travel to a destination and shoot. But yeah, I think that was definitely one of the most exciting ones.
We've also been on projects that a very specific project didn't have a script, but it wasn't an improv project specifically. The director just wanted it to be very, very organic. So all we were allowed to do with actors was to give them a character breakdown and then figure out a way to audition them that didn't feel like improv, especially because it was not a comedy.
Right.
So that it felt very real, but it was still scenario-driven improvisation. And that was also fascinating for us because we, again, from a performance background, got to actually interact with those actors and see. And there were some people who were totally up for it, who jumped right in. And there were some people who looked at us like we were crazy.
I didn't know what was happening.
But so whenever there's a sort of wrench in the puzzle, it becomes fascinating for us, I think.
Yeah, because then it's not necessarily just the cut and dry, like, here are your sides, here's this. We get called upon to, because in both of the scenarios, we created the audition for it. We weren't told how to do it. They said, well, here's the problem. How are you going to casting directors? And we went, okay, well, here's how it could work. And, going back to your earlier question, I think it actually helps to have a performance background because we can put both sides on and go, okay, if I were an actor coming in, would I know would I be able to do this? Would this get me to what I needed to do? And also from the casting standpoint, does this give us enough information to be able to make an educated decision when we're ultimately going to cast someone? So those, and even, you were mentioning The Dirt earlier, which was a project that didn't come to fruition, but that we did spend 8 weeks during the summer auditioning people, and that was another sort of unorthodox process where there was no script. It was based on a book. So people had to read the book. Who gets asked to read a book? You know what I mean? For an audition, it was like homework. People were like, wait, what? And it was not a small book at all. If you go read
not light reading.
It's a huge, it's a fascinating read. I highly recommend it, but it's a huge book. And then we had to basically come up with a process by which we were going to get the essence of these characters.
That's incredible. Now, you mentioned earlier, there are two, various types of, casting. When you have the script and you have the funding and you're ready to go, and when you don't, and you're trying to get someone attached. And a lot of filmmakers feel that they need, names to be in their film so that, audience will come and watch it. Do you agree? And do you have examples when that wasn't true?
Yes and no, and yes and no.
All right.
Multiple questions, multiple answers. I think to answer the question from a casting standpoint, Tom Hanks gave an interview right before Captain Phillips opened in which he said, a movie star cannot guarantee a box office anymore. However, from an independent standpoint, going to your financiers might have a cast contingency. They might say, hey, I won't give you the money unless you have a certain level of a name. So it is kind of a catch-22. I think that what things like Paranormal Activity are showing is that good material will garner an audience. There are plenty of independent films that do not use stars. There are plenty of films that do use stars. There are plenty of studio films that don't do well, despite the fact they have stars in them. So it is sort of an imperfect equation. And I think that there are examples to support both theories. But I think that ultimately, especially from a casting perspective, if you have a cast contingent financing, it's really important then to get a casting director on board so that you can have a cohesive cast. You can say, hey, who is the right person for this role, rather than just saying, name A. Well, name A fulfills our financing, but is name A right for our movie? Is name A right for this role? We don't know, but we're going to put her in there anyway because it's going to get us our financing. And then it becomes dangerous because then you have to sort of fulfill the rest of your obligations with that casting, but it might not be the movie that you want it to be. So if you make it a collaborative process from the beginning, I think you can sort of fulfill both ends of the bargain, if that makes sense.
It does. And have there ever been times where you've had to influence a director or producer to go with a different cast than maybe they wanted?
I don't know that I would say it that way. I would say, look, ultimately, film is a director's medium. So even if we have opinions about actors or thoughts about actors, all we can do is educate. And there are various ways that we do that, but we can only give an opinion and our opinion and give our educated opinion about somebody. But ultimately, it has to be the director that says yes or no, because that vision, how that film is going to look, how that film is going to feel, is coming through that person's brain and that person's eye, that person's heart. So sometimes we could believe, oh my God, this is the right actor, this is the right actor, and it's not exactly what the director feels like. So we have to take that into consideration, and given that, advise accordingly. But it has to be the directors, and sometimes, ultimately the producer, or whoever's giving the money saying yes or no. It has to sort of be that. So I don't know that I would say that we've influenced, but I definitely think that we, depending on our relationship with the director or with the producer, we've had more conversation about the cast and the direction for the cast, as opposed to simply shepherding actors through the door and having somebody go yes, no, you know. And we encourage that kind of conversation. I think it's helpful, and I think for collaborative art like filmmaking, even if you have the conversation and ultimately you go back to your own decision, just having had that knowledge and that conversation about it is important.
Was there a time where maybe you suggested someone that the director wasn't even considering, that they ended up
Absolutely.
taking your advice?
Absolutely.
That's definitely happened. And that happens a lot simply because I think we know,
our job
you
to
know
know
what
actors.
I mean? Exactly. We have a much, and this goes back to why use a casting director. It is our job to know the actors that are out there, to know the up and coming actors that maybe you've never heard of before. Because why would you? You know what I mean? And sometimes, you know, there are people that we know simply because we've auditioned them. Maybe they've never been in a single film yet. They're just waiting for that opportunity, but we know them, and then all of a sudden that right project comes along, and it's like, oh my God, you know, where was this person all along? So I think that has definitely happened on a lot of times, and, you know.
I mean, I think it's happened on both sides. There was somebody in a very specific project that we recommended, and the producer said, I know that person. I don't feel that person is right. I actually think that she's too old. And we said, okay, let's bring her in anyway. Let's just see. We did, and when he saw the audition tape, he said, that's it. That's it.
You talked about you know, having relationships with actors and having them come in over and over again, but how do your relationships with agents and managers enhance your ability to get, you know, higher quality talent?
I mean, I think, again, that's part of our job. You know, we interface with agents and managers constantly. So by virtue of that, and you know, along the years, building the reputation for, hopefully, at least we think, having good quality projects, and you know, putting together the ensembles of cast that we have, I think that sort of lends a credibility to the projects, and that allows us to go out and say, look, this is a great project, your client should really read this. Does it guarantee anything? No, there are no guarantees in this business.
But what it does help aiding in, especially if we're discussing attaching talent, it doesn't guarantee a yes, but it does guarantee an answer. Our relationships in general, because of our relationships, we will get a phone call back. We will get to have a conversation with agents or managers. Whereas if we didn't have those relationships, we might end up on a phone sheet.
Right.
Yeah.
We might get an email back. But because we have spent years building those relationships across the town with every different agency, we can get an answer more rapidly.
Now, this is another question that a lot of indie, you know, producers probably is that most indie films have much lower budgets than studio films, which means lower pay for actors. Are some actors willing to work for less pay, and why? What's the payoff for them?
I think that, you know, there's always a trade-off. So we sort of like to say, you either have amazing material or you have a lot of money. Both can get your film made.
Amazing when you have both.
You know, yeah, sure. It would be great if you had amazing material with a lot of money, but somehow the two don't often or always come hand in hand. And I think that is the trade-off. If you have an incredible script and you have a role that an actor needs to play, you know, or hasn't been given an opportunity to play somewhere else, that's when somebody will take a hit on the upfront money. They might not take a hit across the board. so hear this carefully when you're planning your budgets. We'll take a little bit of a hit on the upfront to be able to have that opportunity. In some cases, it's the same like for production. You'll have someone who's, you know, a step below, like an assistant art director. They'll take a hit on their fee to be an art director on a movie to get that credit. And it works the same way with actors. Sometimes it's to be able to work with a certain director, to be able to work with a certain producer. But oftentimes it's to be able to do a certain type of role that they're not being given another opportunity to do. And I think that's a sort of situation where people will do that. And, you know, that's why tons of people are doing indie films, because there are all these incredible roles that sometimes the studios they're not able to make those films, and independent filmmakers can make them. And, you know, that's a great thing.
Now, you said you're willing to take a hit on the upfront. Is that alluding to maybe that they might make more money later on, or that there's some other kind of payoff?
I mean, there are so many different ways to sort of negotiate a contract. There's always back-end points. Depending on the film, those aren't always seen. Sometimes you can do a producer credit or a producer fee. It all depends on, I'm not a producer, I'm not a line producer, I haven't budgeted a film. But it depends, you can get with the budgeting of a film in order to keep your cast budget down initially, which is why some people, it can answer the question of working for less money. But I think most often it really does come down to the material and the role and what they're being given the opportunity to do. But nobody likes to work for free.
Of course.
So there has to be a trade-off in some capacity. It doesn't always have to be a check. So for example, Charlize Theron in Monster, Halle Berry, Monsters Ball, being given the opportunity to really dive into a role that they had not been given the opportunity to do before. Nicole Kidman in The Hours. These all happen to be Oscar-winning roles, but
Never mind that.
but I don't know that they knew that going into it. So certainly there's a trade-off with the material, and I think that's why people get excited about independent cinema.
You talked about point systems. Do you guys have anything to do with negotiating the contracts?
We do. In fact, that's a large portion of what we do. Depending on the production and who else is involved, sometimes there's a lawyer, sometimes there's a producer who has relationships and they'll negotiate. But for the most part, we do negotiate most of the contracts in it. But again, it's based on the setup that the line producer and the producer have established in terms of back-end points and box office bonuses or anything like that. We don't have any say in that. We just negotiate it.
What goes into the skill set of being able to negotiate that? Like, what are some, I don't know, I have no idea what happens in that room. Can you describe it?
It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of conversations. But essentially we act as liaison. There are two liaisons. We are the liaison for the production, and the agent or manager is a liaison for the actor. So it's almost like two lawyers going head to head in a proceeding, in a divorce proceeding. It's about, what do you want? What can I give you? Where's in the middle?
Exactly. It's the basis for all negotiations.
Now, are there examples of situations where an actor who's well known might have wanted to work with a director this is his first feature, he's never been seen before?
Sure.
Why would an actor take a chance on, a no name?
I don't know that I can answer why they would do that.
I think it's also not specifically about the director always. It's sometimes about the material.
Right.
Going back to Halle Berry and Monsters Ball, that was his first feature, right?
Yeah, Lee Danzo's first feature on that one. But I think that what I was going to say is I can't speak to each actor and their individual reason for wanting to do it, but a lot of times a first-time feature director doesn't mean a first-time director. So it means that sometimes, not always, but oftentimes, there is a body of work. We're seeing a lot of people come from, having established YouTube channels or having a music video background or doing some incredible student film, and then getting a 3-picture deal. So they don't come from nothing and out of nowhere, and you've never heard of them before. You might not have heard of them before, but there's something to show, coupled with the fact that there's an amazing script. And I think that's sort of it. And sometimes, like anything else, it's a leap of faith. You say, I read the script, I really want to play this role. Well, this is a first-time feature director, and then they meet and they see. And like anything else, if the director is passionate about the project, a lot of times they can sell their passion and say, look, this is how I'm going to do it. This is, that's in some cases how we get on board stuff. There are tons of first-time directors that we work with that we don't know what's going to happen with the feature. And a lot of times we're on board because the material is so great and their passion for it is so great. And I think, everything that each one of us does in this business is such a leap of faith across the board. You never know. Even after it's edited, you have no idea if anybody's going to see the film. You don't know how it's going to be received. So I think, you sort of just have to be passionate about the work. And if two passions sort of come together, I think that's why people choose to work with one another.
You mentioned that there's so much going on right now with YouTube, which we're at right now, and you know, online web series and things like that. Are you guys finding yourself more and more dealing with new media contracts and new types of media?
Often. I mean, you can't do a film on a new media contract. But certainly web series, we've done plenty of, and actually video games, performance capture. It's a fascinating sort of world. And so yes, there's plenty of that out there as far as new media goes. And we're seeing a lot of people use new media to launch bigger projects.
Now, technology, since we're talking about and how that's changing the industry, technology's also changed how filmmakers work so much in the last 10 years. How has technology changed the casting process?
Tremendously.
Yeah, we were talking, I mean, just in, not that I want to date myself here, but you know, just in the time that I've been in casting, the amazing leaps that technology has taken to where it's point and shoot kind of thing, you know what I mean? You have digital. We had to digitize everything, you know what I mean? It wasn't immediately digital when we were filming to begin with. And I think that it's made it easier in some cases because the process happens quicker. But as a result, everybody expects everything to happen much faster. So gone are the days where you can take 24 hours to do anything. Everybody expects it to be immediate, you know? And I think even just with, you know, honestly, which isn't even a technology that we use in the casting process, but having a cell phone, there's an expectation that you are reachable and available and you will receive an email whenever someone sends it. And sometimes it's incredibly helpful, and you can get deals done over the weekend, whereas you couldn't before because you would never bother somebody at home. And other times, you know, it's a lot. It can be overwhelming when you're like, literally, they expect it to happen as it's happening live almost.
But technology certainly has helped and shortened the casting process a bit. Even when I first started, we would get messengers every day with headshots, with actual hard copy headshots. And now everything's online, so we put out a breakdown and 30 seconds later people are clicking their talent to submit. And it pops up on our screen.
I think something else that's actually important that isn't about us, but it's about the actor, that all of this technology has allowed more people in some cases to have access to auditions. And what I mean by that is previously, if you weren't physically in the location where the casting director was and you weren't in the room with the casting director, you missed out. You didn't have an opportunity. Now it's, oh, you're not there? Great, put yourself on tape, email it to us, we'll get it there. And it's incredible. I mean, the last several films that we've done, we've cast people from London, from Scotland, from all these different
Skype callbacks.
Skype, all of these things. And
we've
even some
actually cast, we've cast entire films where our director was not in Los Angeles. So we were never in the room with him.
Yeah, everything was sent to him digitally.
Yeah.
And you guys are bi-coastal as well. How does that affect, or how do you run a bi-coastal agency when you're both in LA, by the way?
We're not always both
We're not
in
always
LA.
both in LA. We go back and forth. But, you know, it depends. Like this past summer, or I guess last year at this point, I was in New York for a good chunk of time because I was shooting a film that was physically shooting in New York. So I was on the ground there. A lot of other times, you know, we go back and forth frequently that we're auditioning people there. And when we're not physically there, they're putting themselves on tape. But because we go back and forth, we know the talent pool. It's not like we're saying, wait, we don't know who you are. We've met all these people because we go back and forth casting. Even if we're not physically there, they just self-tape. And, you know, people are so used to it now that it's not even an issue. A couple of years ago, people were like, what? Wait, self-tape? No, you know. But now it's just so easy for people.
Now, you've talked about going through the interview process a little bit and working with that director who wasn't even in the city. In a sea of options, how does a director or producer find the right casting director for them and for their project?
Question. I think it sort of depends. You know, I think you can.
Well, I mean, I think on one level, it's really about finding the right person you want to collaborate with. Since it really is about the director's vision ultimately, it's about finding the person who shares that director's vision so that your casting director can really facilitate and be your eyes. Because a director's not always in the room. A director shouldn't have to sit through 300 people for one role. They don't have the time.
You don't want to.
So it's about trusting your casting director to be shepherding the proper talent. So really about meeting with the casting director and seeing, do they share your vision for the script? Do they understand it the same way you do? Are they dissecting it the same way that you are? And also, do they share a passion for it? And I think that is really integral, but similar to how do you pick a DP? How do you pick a line producer? Is it somebody who's probably tested, who you are familiar with their work? And I would say to somebody who has never used a casting director before, if you haven't met one before, think of a film that you really like, that you think is really well cast. Not, oh, there are a bunch of movie stars in this film, but a film that doesn't take you out of it because of the cast, and it has a really cohesive ensemble cast. And it feels that everybody is right for that world and everybody works together. Look at who cast it.
And then reach out to them.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of it's probably referrals and recommendations as well.
Sure, like anything else. But again, if you're talking to the filmmaker or, you know, the producer filmmaker that doesn't necessarily have any connections and is starting it out and trying to find somebody, you know, do some research, see who you like, and take a shot. You know, maybe that person has the same passion that you do for the project, and then great, you know. And what's the worst that happened? They say no, and then you try and find somebody else that has.
Here you go. And that's the way it works in this industry. You're always looking for your next job.
Right.
Does the casting director's job end when the film begins, or are you still involved once the film is?
I think it sort of depends. Oftentimes, all of the principal roles are cast. For the most part, our job is complete. You know, once all the paperwork is signed and the cast is locked down. If, however, you know, you have a movie where certain principal actors don't work till later on, and we're still technically casting as, you know, production is rolling, and honestly, on a larger budget film, that is much more common. Whereas you solidify the leads, and then even as they're shooting, you're basically casting day players almost as they're working. But I think other times, once it's done, you know,
our job
we're around.
done. When all the speaking roles have been cast and signed on the dotted line, then our job is done,
Yeah.
whether that is before the cameras start rolling or after. But there are times that there are questions. Sometimes, you know, we'll get credit sequences to verify with all of the, hey, is this correct? Is this the deal that you negotiated?
Right.
Basically, our job is done when the principal players and anybody who speaks
Is locked.
is locked.
Have you, I'm sure this happens a lot in television, but have you ever had an experience where you've had to recast an actor in the middle of shooting a film?
I was trying to figure out, like, I don't remember when it happened. There have definitely been situations where we've had to recast actors. Whether or not that's been, I mean, I don't remember a situation where cameras had already rolled on an actor and then we had to recast them. That has not yet happened, thankfully. But we've definitely had situations where deals were closed and one thing or other came up and the actor pulled out of the project, and so then you had to recast, you know, the role. Thankfully, it hasn't happened that often, but things happen.
Questions. What are your favorite types of films to cast and why?
I don't know that I have a favorite type of film to cast. I think I just really love awesome stories and whatever form that takes. You know, when I read a script, if I can see this film, if I can the characters, if I can get into the story, then I want to work on it. You know what I mean? And I don't think that it matters, you know, what outside form that takes.
I think part of the reason we work so well is we have a very similar aesthetic. So we sound very, very much the same way to similar material. But if you look at our resume, we have spanned genres from spoof comedy to grounded comedy to severe drama, because it's really all about the characters.
Yeah.
And so character-driven material, if I can read a script and really get into the character, even some like comedic horror films, if it's really character-driven and I am moved by it in some way, that's a film that I really want to work on, specifically because I know that's a film an actor wants to work on.
Right.
My last question, and this is a little bit more on a personal note, is you talked about guys have had to travel together and you've had to work a lot of long hours, and I'm sure it's a very intense job. I can't imagine working with one of my siblings. How do you guys not kill each other? What's your secret?
There are days.
I don't know. I think kind of, we work very well together, and
we've always been close.
yeah.
And when we did start working together, we did sort of have to redefine part of our relationship, and that period was very tough. But after that, it's been 8 years.
Probably.
I'm not to date myself.
I agree.
But
Soft light.
But we haven't, fortunately, encountered many issues in that respect. We are very considerate of each other, and we just have a very great working relationship. There are certainly times when, because we spend so much time together, it becomes difficult to make the distinction between work life and private life. And there are moments where I have to take a step back and say, okay, we're done working. We are done working right now.
Let's have a drink.
But that is, I would imagine, the nature of any working
partnership,
relationship. So the fact that we are siblings, I think, only helps.
Feel that in some ways it's made you closer?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that at any point you would ever go on your own? Or are you guys committed to, like, we're in this together?
Can't imagine wanting to.
Yeah.
Unless for some reason we're in a different field.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, I don't even know.
I don't see the upside to it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, we've got some questions from our audience members via Twitter. Andrea Morris asks, what makes your office stand apart from other casting offices, and what's your special sauce?
That is a difficult question to answer.
Having not worked in,
We both worked with other casting directors, but I can say we do that I think is special, but I certainly don't want to speak negatively about any other casting, and many of whom I haven't worked with. I think coming from a performance background, both of us, really lends itself to being able to, as Lauren said before, see both sides. To be able to say, from an actor standpoint, is this audition going to be what I need? And from a production standpoint, to say, am I going to be able to see what I need to from that actor? I think that's very important, to be able to read a script and say, I understand these characters. I can break them all down. I understand exactly what's happening. I think that's something that we lend ourselves to very well, which is why we can work so easily across genres, because it's all about character. And our special sauce, I think, is that we're siblings. We have a very specific working dynamic that is different than many other offices.
Probably almost all other offices. Do you know of any other sibling offices?
Yes, Labrador Heart.
I don't know them at all, but we were told by another person siblings. So.
And actually, Bonnie Zane and Deborah Zane are siblings, but they no longer work together.
Don't have the
So
special
that special sauce did not work for them.
Other one, this one, hashtag we make movies, hashtag how we make movies. And the question is, any success stories about casting against type? And that's from @PatrickC.Duncan.
That's a good question.
I'm
sure the answer is yes. I now have to think about it.
Well, there was a role in Annabelle that was originally written, it was a man, and it was written as a white man, and it wound up being an African-American woman. So I think that's as anti-type as you can get. And that really is about, again, looking at the essence of a character and saying, was there any reason that this role needed to be a man at all, let alone a Caucasian man? And really figuring out who would really bring the essence of the character to life. And that's how we, as a collaborative team, got into, well, let's really broaden that out. And it wound up being Alfre Woodard. But
Was it an idea to, widen the net?
Definitely our idea to think outside of the box on that particular role.
Does that happen often?
Sometimes. I mean, not in that, not to that degree. We don't go through every script going, well, what about making this role, man? Like that's not our job. And sometimes those things that, you get stuck on a role and you can't you're not finding what it is. So you say, okay, well, what if? And again, that has to be collaborative, because we could come up with an idea and the writer's like, that's so not even, no, that's a terrible
You're fired.
That's horrible. but that's the thing. It's like, you know, a lot of times we have the freedom to think that way, and that's why the producers and the directors and the writer go, come back down. We're not going there. You know, but sometimes I do think about the against type, and you know, sometimes, especially you know, in the moment, trying to think of these anecdotes, they don't come as readily. Find me in 20 minutes, I'll have more stories. But I think oftentimes we try and think about when it's appropriate going against type, where there's no point in casting against type for the sake of casting against type. But sometimes, again, you know, when you were asking about why people do things, to be given an opportunity to play a role that nobody has seen them play before, you know, and if we can help facilitate that.
This is a question for me, just on a, you know, kind of seeing the changing landscape. For a long time, there's been complaints of, you know, you only see a certain type of person on camera, and that's been changing so drastically, and introducing new characters on camera that we've never seen before. Have you noticed it? How have you noticed it changing? And is it? I don't know what my question is.
I see what you're saying, and I know, you know, there's been a push towards diversity across the board, and that's not just talking about, you know, ethnicity. It's talking about gender, and it's talking about sexuality, and so that the landscape of the characters that you see in cinema more readily mirror the landscape of the characters that we see in life, because isn't that the point? And I think that that's happening across the board with the type of material, you know, that people are doing. And again, this is where independent cinema is sort of pushing the envelope of the types of characters that you're seeing. And I think, you know, all stories are now being able to be told. And so you're seeing different characters come on the screen.
The way in which those stories are allowed to be told in a very real way, whereas not too long ago, if those particular stories were addressed, they would have been addressed in a very different way.
Yeah. So I think there's been a conscious push, and in some cases an unconscious push, just because of the politics of what's happening in the world today, and the job, in some cases, of an artist to reflect that.
Awesome. We've got another question. This one is hashtag We Make Movies from our member at @mlukadu, and she asks, you've also produced some films. Can you talk about one or two of these projects?
Yes. The films that we sort of produced, again, we came on at a very sort of early stage. And because so early, we wound up having a more producerial hand in it. We don't do it often, and we don't try to come on board productions in order to produce them. It just, those particular ones, and there's only been like two
or three.
Where it just was the makeup of the people and the particular project, and again, passion, how we felt for the project that we came aboard. You know, in some cases, because of our background and because of my background in production, it's been beneficial, especially for young filmmakers. In some cases, just using us as an added source of information.
There was one film that I'm credited as a producer on, and I got to spend the entire time on set. And that was the first time, not as a performer on set, that I really was on an entire shoot. And it was fascinating for me, and I learned so much that I wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to do. So that for me was wonderful.
That is, as a casting director, you don't, I mean, even if you're invited, you don't get to see
the inner workings of set.
How it all comes together. You just cross your fingers and wait for the end. You know what I mean? You know what happens going in, but you never get to see the inner workings of it. So those opportunities, we both had that opportunity on different films to be on set every single day as a producer. And yeah, I think I learned a tremendous amount about now what I do and how it ultimately plays out on the production stage.
That happened, did they ask you, or did you say, listen, I will do anything to see this happen, I'm donating my time, or I want to be a part of this?
In both instances, separately, they asked us.
Yeah. Interesting. Because of your, pool of knowledge?
Yeah, they were both or young filmmakers, and in the case of me, the director said, "What you've done is invaluable. I really would like your opinion on set every day." And I said, it is just my opinion, but I'm happy to offer it. Like, I don't know what it's going to do for you. And it was equally invaluable to me because I did learn so much about how what I do in the pre-production affects what happens during production.
Yeah. But it's not a common thing.
Right.
That it has to be a very special circumstance.
We've got another one. This one is at Nathan Paul, and he asks, what is the most common mistake actors make when coming in the room?
I think the short answer to that question would be simply being unprepared. There's a lot of subsections to that, and a lot of other things that fall under it. But I feel like that's sort of it.
I also think actors will understand this, but getting in your own way, which unprepared certainly goes in. But auditioning is a very specific skill, totally separate skill than acting. Some incredible actors are lacking in audition skills. So preparation certainly helps with that, but also getting out of your head, dealing with nerves. And these are things that as an actor you have to be aware of as well so that you can be more prepared to go into your audition. But generally speaking, I think that we are a pretty friendly room, so we like to calm everybody down, take a deep breath. We'll start when you're ready.
What is your waiting room like? Do you try to have a waiting room that's like very zen and welcoming? Does that matter?
I think it does. I think one of the thing that I would hope we can say, we tend to run on time, and I think that's sort of very important, so that you don't have a backed up waiting room. The circumstances of what's actually happening in the waiting room, we can't control. Actors will do their own thing, but I do think that that's actually an important, that you're not sitting there for 40 minutes to an hour before your go time, so to speak. That it's you show up, you audition, you leave. And yeah, sometimes things happen, people run behind. It's the nature of what it is, and sometimes emergencies happen, and you're sitting there, whatever. But I think that's kind of it in terms of how the waiting room goes. But yeah, we try not to have it be too hectic, but you can't really control everything that happens.
Try not to have people who are auditioning for the same role waiting at the same time.
Yeah, you don't want to have a lineup of people and everybody's going, oh. They're taking the boxes.
It's going to be uncomfortable in a room of people that look just like you.
Right.
Okay, here's a good one. Hashtag We Make Movies. I'm a native Hawaiian and noticed that Spartacus had a lot of Pacific Islanders in it. What was that your doing? And that's from C. Cookie.
I think the answer is no. Shot in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So that in some cases is the native population. So it reflected the native population of where it was, Australia and New Zealand.
Did you have to go to New Zealand to
cast?
No, there was a local casting director on that.
There was both a local Australian and a local New Zealand casting director.
Boo. All right, this one is from at Chris Greg Fred, and he asks, Bass Casting mentioned going on set as casting directors. What do casting directors do on set?
We have been invited to set just
to say hi.
Not in a capacity as a casting director.
No.
You cast our film. Come say hi to set.
That's sort of what I was saying. We don't often get a chance to go to set. A lot of the times our films aren't even shooting in Los Angeles, but when they are, sometimes they've invited us down to set just to say hello, just to see the inner workings of it. But we have no actual purpose there, which is why we don't go. We don't actually have a purpose on set.
Well, that's sweet anyway. This one comes from another audience member, and he asked, Mally Finn was a legend of casting. Is there anything you learned from her that you still use?
Oh my God, everything. Honestly, everything. I mean, you said it well, whoever you are, Twitter person, and that she was, and still is a legend in casting, and her passion for what she did just permeated everything. And I think, there are so many great lessons that she taught me, but one of which, and this is a lesson that my grandfather also taught me, the idea to never be afraid to keep learning. And I think that in what we do that is so important, we are constantly learning new things in what we do in terms of, I mean, not just how to attack our job, but in who we interface with. You know, if we shut ourselves off to being afraid to learn something new, we'd never take a chance with new talent, be it directors or producers or actors. And that was something that, you know, she really lived by, and that was sort of the way that The Office ran, and I think that that was hugely important. Also just in the way that I think she approached the whole process. You know, I'm sure if I took several hours, I could itemize what these things were, but it was more her essence and how she did everything that I think, you know, through osmosis you sort of pick up, and then you start to attack your process that way as well. The sheer joy she had just working with actors, and I think that's something that we share, just, you know, the idea that we love being in the room with actors and auditioning people, and the care that she took to make sure that every last person in that film was so perfect for that film. You know, that was something that was hugely important, that it's not just about the flashy players, it's down to the one-liners, down to anybody who shows up in that film, to create that cohesive body and the care that she took with it. I mean, there's honestly not a day that goes by that I don't wish that I could call her and ask her about stuff. I'm gonna want to cry, but like, she was just such a special and amazing person, and just the passion that she had for what she did.
That was really beautiful. We have another one here. I think we've got time for one more. This one is really, I think, interesting, probably very personal to both of you. He asked, have there been any projects that you're particularly proud of, and can you talk about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're proud of a lot of the, you know, it's an thing, and you can jump in, but in each project, there's something that I think we've been proud of, and I think that's the beauty, and again, this goes back to sort of Mally's thinking of it. Each project has its own set of challenges, and you know, when you can kind of go, oh yeah, we nailed that, you know, whatever that is for that project, I feel like we walk away going, yeah, that was awesome. I think that's what keeps it exciting and keeps it new. So, you know, I don't want to name anything and have other people feel bad about the project, but I feel really strongly about that each project that we've done has been something unique, even if it was something only we, you know.
But I mean, to that end, there, I think looking back on a bunch of films and just being able to say that is a good ensemble, being proud of that work. Some have been more difficult than others to put together, but I think that each project that we attach ourselves to, that we attack differently, there is a sense of pride in our work. So I as well don't want to name projects over the others, because I have no idea who will be watching this.
We love all our children.
We love them the same.
Theoretically.
but it's also one of those things, I think in some cases when you can look at that and say, God, yeah, that was the right, is it symbiosis? That was the right moment and the right time with the right actor. And then, you know, better is when that's the launching pad for an actor to go on to something bigger and grander, or when everybody else goes, oh my God, where'd that actor come from? And we're like, yeah, we know that. And I think, you know,
I'd be happy to give an example of.
Well, I think across the board, you know, most casting directors would say that that's their favorite part, is when they sort of, you know, I don't want to use the word discover because we weren't discovering, but we gave that person an opportunity, and that opportunity launched them to other opportunities. And that's incredibly exciting.
That was the example that I was going to give. We had the opportunity to meet Caleb Landry Jones on Last Exorcism in New Orleans. He came from Texas, and he had never done anything before, and being able to give him his first project, which then launched him onto so many other things.
A little film called X-Men, you might have heard of.
And when I saw him in X-Men, I was like, I found him! And that's exciting.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your wealth of information with us. And I'm sure the filmmakers at home are going to definitely make sure that they find a casting director on their next film if they weren't thinking about it already, right? So thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause.